Hey there everyone, AJ back again for the Mighty Gluestick channel. I make videos about Dungeons & Dragons lore full-time and have a collection of hundreds of monster ecology and strategy videos on my channel. If you like what I do, please consider subscribing as I upload at least twice a week. My first, in this case, multiple times per week, my first monster ecology video was the Roper, for those long-time fans who remember way back years ago. Friends who have played in my campaigns over the years will tell you that I am sure to put a Roper into the game at some point, normally when least expected and always in such a way that the things are that they're facing is very confusing, right up until the big eye opens and they are pulled into that large fang-lined maw. So today, I will be taking a look at the Piercer and the Roper, because as of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, they are one and the same. To me, it makes perfect sense that Piercers are the juvenile form of the Roper. I don't know why this was not the case earlier, to be honest. In Forgotten Realms lore, there's also a very, very similar, basically somebody who sort of made a mollusk version of the Piercer as well, but that got fairly confusing with the lore, particularly when I was researching it, so we can just ignore that. The Piercer's origin was in 1975 in the issue number 3 of the Strategic Review. It did get an ecology article of sorts in Dragon number 72, but this was more of a one-page story and basically represents what the average scholar of Greyhawk thinks of the creature. This is before the monster ecology articles really sort of kicked into gear and done Dragon magazine, which they admit they really know very little about, the Greyhawk scholars I should say, as when it falls from the roof of the cavern it either kills its target or splatters on the floor. What we do know is that they hatch from eggs that are glossy and black, adhered stickily in clumps of 6 to 8 in crevices in caves, ruins, and throughout the Underdark. They're about the same size as a chicken egg. They don't take long to hatch, and what emerges looks like an elongated slug with a pointed tail end, which is quite important. That's the identifying factor, is that pointed end. At this larval stage of life, they look a lot like a dark mantle offspring, and join the ranks of hundreds of different species of slugs, worms, and other terrestrial cephalopods, which form a distinct zoological group on many of the worlds of the multiverse, a notable exception being Earth, which has only aquatic cephalopods. This raises an interesting possibility for the Piercer, by the way. An aquatic Piercer could cling to the ocean floor on rocks and reefs filled with gas, and when a ship or creature passes over it, it simply releases and shoots upwards with great force, possibly puncturing a ship's hull. With enough of them, they could tear a ship to shreds or pose a threat to similarly to swimming creatures that are going past, or it's basically like sailing over a minefield. So that should give you some possibilities. Like dark mantles, the Piercers chew away at the surface of the rock, ingesting whatever nutrients they can as well as minerals that they metabolize to form a rigid shell around their body. They are not attached to this shell at any point in their life cycle, then they can always crawl free of it and feed or mate and pull the shell free of a victim it has penetrated if the shell's still in one piece. Shells are often badly damaged by the plummet from the ceiling, and while a missed attack is not always fatal for the Piercer, they are usually very vulnerable on the ground, shell or no shell, easy prey for the likes of umberhulks, oozes and slimes, or any intelligent humanoids who dwell underground, and so on. The growth process is highly variable depending on the numbers of them around and the food sources, but sexual maturity occurs before the Piercer has fully matured into a Roper. This is no doubt due to the dangerous environment they evolved in. One thing I should point out, both Piercers and Ropers have the habit of adhering to the ceiling by preference. Ropers will only stay on the ground pointy side up if it makes more sense for them to hunt from that position, such as next to a ledge, a pool, or an area of particularly dangerous terrain, as we will discuss later. They are ambush predators. Concealment and trickery are their forte. While when not attacking, they are extremely hard to detect, appearing just like a stalagmite or stalactite. The Piercer, being the second stage of the life cycle, is still an unintelligent animal. It reacts on instinct. It can tell the difference between an adult Roper and other creatures, but otherwise, as soon as it sees a target below it, it drops. Now, when you consider that the Piercer has dark vision out to 60 feet, but blind sight only out to 30 feet, it becomes clear that they hunt better at a maximum height of 30 feet. Which is still quite a drop though, and I would say a safer bet would be half that distance. The attack of the Piercer is an all or nothing gambit, +3 to hit. One creature directly underneath the Piercer doing 1d6 piercing damage per 10 feet fallen. with 66 at the full 60 feet of height, but that would be a rare occasion. If the piercer fails on this hit, it takes half damage, falling damage for the distant fallen. The piercer has an armor class of 15 inside its hard shell and 11 if crawling around at a speed of 5 feet per round without it. They have 3d8 plus 9, or between 12 and 33, with an average of 22 hit points. So pretty sturdy for a medium-sized land squid. There is no listing for the bite damage for a piercer, but my advice is don't put anything into that lamprey-like mouth that you don't want to lose. Piercers live in colonies of 10 or so individuals in surface caves and ruins or in the upper underdark, but deeper down they can thrive in colonies of hundreds. Piercers have a rudimentary ability to release at a slight angle, so it's typical that several will drop down at one target when they are triggered. They're not aggressive to each other, and all of them will move down from the ceiling to feed on any prey together before the carrion crawlers and giant arthropods can get a go at it. They can go for days without food. When they start to eat the victim, they will always strip away the skin and then concentrate on eating the fatty tissue, storing it away even as they chew into the meat and start to digest the meat first. They can then digest slowly the fats over a long period of time to sustain themselves. If one knows what to harvest from one, once they've killed and extracted from their shell, you can make a potent food preservative jelly that can keep meat good for up to several weeks. The piercers have a bland and earthy taste. They are slimy and tough and require some cooking and washing and cooking again, which is the same method used for snails, and I'm told that they've got a bitter aftertaste, so they're not very palatable, but edible. On the ground, the piercers slime themselves up, spitting out the sticky acidic goo that is part digestive fluid they use to eat away the flora and fauna of rock surfaces. This tends to discourage the few scavengers that they have, but it is their only defense outside the shell. Obviously, at this stage of their life cycle, they can't speak or understand language and have an animal's neutral alignment. As they grow, though, this starts to radically change. The mature roper has an intelligence of 7, so their intelligence really just sort of begins when at this stage of life. So they have no awareness of being a younger form of themselves. Wisdom of 16 and charisma of 6, intelligence of 7. They are clever, and although they don't have the capacity to communicate with other creatures aside from possibly telepathy, they can coordinate and work together. They are one of the most adaptable underdark creatures, with the ability to slide out of their rocky shell and squeeze through very tight spaces, and also to hold their breath for a fair while underwater. Plus, their natural slow 10 feet of movement is across any surface. They can be found almost anywhere. Also, they've managed to travel to other planes of existence and even adapted to those highly exotic environments, such as the molten magma roper found in Princess of the Apocalypse adventure, which is only different from the regular roper in that it's immune to fire, vulnerable to cold, and does fire damage on contact, which is pretty nasty considering that this creature grapples its prey, so you're grappled and burning to death. Fun times. The ropers are a challenge rating 5 on paper. Individually, they rarely operate alone, and the threat a party faces from even a small number of ropers ganging up on them is considerably bad. First of all, they are impossible to spot. While the roper remains motionless, it's indistinguishable from a normal cave formation such as a stalagmite. If it's stuck out on the surface world, travelling across country in search of a cave, they can appear like a fallen log, a boulder, a tree stump. In a desert, they can appear like a petrified tree. In a city, they can look like a pile of bricks or manure, even mimic the side of a stone gate or an archway. They may hide out and rest upside down under a bridge, snatching pets and livestock, rats and fish as they lurk undetected. The graspy tendrils of the roper are typically represented as tentacles, but they're not. They're a sticky substance that is fairly unique to the roper. Not able to manipulate the environment with them like prehensile limbs, they just shoot them out and snare prey like a chameleon tongue. The roper can have up to 6 tendrils at a time. Each tendril has an armor class of 20, only 10 hit points, and an immunity to poison and psychic damage. I guess the psychic damage thing would be from being in the Underdark with Drow and all sorts of other psychic critters. Destroying the tendril deals no damage to the roper at all, which can extrude a replacement tendril on its next turn, and there's no listing for how many times it can do this, so almost indefinitely. The tendril can also be broken if a creature takes an action and succeeds on a DC 15 strength check against it, but it's still covered in a very sticky goop afterwards. But it's not that high, so, it is possible to break free of these things. As a weapon, the tendrils are quite effective though. Each round the roper can reel in its tendrils up to 25 feet back towards itself. It can make up to 4 attacks with its tendrils and bite a creature within 5 feet of its fang-filled, quite large maw. The roper itself is a large creature and the bite it can inflict is formidable. The tendrils are +7 to hit, with an enormous reach of 50 feet, so watch out for those opportunity attacks and make the most of them when you can get them. A grappled target has an escape difficulty class of 15, restraining the victim and giving disadvantage on all strength-related checks and saving throws. In earlier editions, this was a strength-draining effect, weakening the grappled targets, which made it so much worse. Once reeled in, the roper has an armor class of 20 and 11 d10 plus 33, or between 44 and 143, with an average of 93 hit points, so victims will have a hard time killing it before it takes a bite out of them. The bite is +7 to hit and does a whopping 4d8 plus 4 piercing damage. The roper doesn't mess around, they will just eat a character immediately if they can. Ropers are intelligent enough to use the terrain to their advantage. They have a huge threat radius. There is nothing stopping them from latching onto a character and dragging them off a edge of a chasm or into a pool of water and just letting them drown. They might drag them into a stagnant pond with a couple of chul in it. They might drag them into a pit with a starving rust monster. They might combine their efforts with a couple of cave fishes, so the prey doesn't know what sort of creature the tendrils are coming from. They will certainly drag their prey through an area targeted by piercers, who have a much easier time perforating a restrained target. If none of them are about, perhaps there is a small roost of sturges or a patch of some nasty underground fungus, slime or ooze. As long as the roper is going to get a chance of feeding well on the carcass, they have no issues of taking advantage of other creatures in the area to aid their hunting the same prey. They also prepare for long periods without food by killing as many prey as they can whenever they can, even more than they can eat before it decays too much for them to have to abandon the area as swarms of carrion feeders such as centipedes, giant beetles, oozes, carrion crawlers and troglodytes arrive. If you really want to murder your party, consider combining ghouls, ghosts, ropers and carrion crawlers with a scattering of rot grubs. Also, Drow are particularly fond of using ropers due to some religious affiliations of the past. Of course, Drow specialise in paralysing people. Many of them don't really recall why ropers are kind of considered sacred animals of the Underdark, but they know it has something to do with the Dark Elves before they became the Drow. Drow also consider the Dark Mantle and the roper to be more closely related species than most surface world scholars are aware of. The truth is, Garnadau, the greater god of aberrations, was worshipped by some of the Dark Elves of Ilithir before, in the beginning of the Age of the First Flowering and continuing through to the Crown Wars. Those who turn away from Lolth quite often take up depraved worship of him. The Church of Gwynedau consists of cults scattered throughout the Underdark, each dominated by a single individual. Duiblex and Gwynedau are one and the same. The Demon Lord is an aspect of Gwynedau, so cults of Duiblex also feed into this power. The true nature of the ancient being which lurks, the Elder Eye, the Lord of Slime, will be revealed in a later video, so stay tuned for that one. It's going to be quite a shocker. There are a few variants forms of the roper, most notably the Urophion is the result where an elithid tadpole is implanted into a roper's brain. These miserable creatures are nearly as intelligent as their mind flayer kin, but are treated as no more than convenient tools for the mind flayers to use as they see fit. They live lonely, brooding lives on the fringes of Mind Flayer society, just within range of the Elder Brain's domination, serving as guardians and sentinels, with little reward for their loyalty other than the promise of joining the Elder Brain on death, although that's rarely fulfilled. They have all the normal qualities of a roper, plus they can extract brains like a Mind Flayer, and have the same mental powers, including mind reading, suggestion, and mind blast. They are quite nasty. Much more intelligent than any regular roper and typically lawful evil, devoted to their elder brain and rarely given a chance of individual freedom. Still, who would notice a Europhian, its elithid colony destroyed, slipping away slowly and quietly into the darkness? What sort of activities could a creature like that get up to? Makes for a pretty good evil genius, really. You get bonus points as a dungeon master if you don't reveal the true nature of the Europhian until it extracts the first brain from the adventuring party. Of course, you may not have any friends after that. They knew the risks of venturing into the underworld with a fully trained dungeon master at the helm, fueled on hours and hours of monster ecology and strategy videos. What more could they wish for than a terrible but memorable death? I mean, glory is meaningless if it's just handed to you. Another variant might be suitable for a Spelljammer campaign with a meteoric piercer that tears into the ship's hull and floating asteroid colonies of ropers. Also, they make a good base template for giant jellyfish or huge filter feeder creatures from the elemental planes of water or air, with some simple modifications to their basic physical attributes. Subscribe if you like what I do. Activate the notification-tron. Check out for Patreon for some exclusive content. You can find the link on my title page. It's just down the side. There's a little Patreon symbol. Also, the full scripts for these videos are available there. Buy some merchandise from my Teespring range. Wear your deeply nerdy apparel with pride. Check out Patron Blades for a mighty smooth shave. And as always, thanks for listening, and I'll be back with more for you very soon.